During a live podcast, my boyfriend joked about having a secret family and said I wasn't his type. The host laughed, crowd cheered, and he smirked, "Now you're viral." So I played a voice memo of him crying over cheating and watched him crumble. I swear the air inside that studio in Austin, Texas felt thick enough to choke on. The neon lights were hot on my face, the audience was packed so close I could hear every breath, and the host's grin stretched so wide it looked rehearsed. But none of that compared to the moment my partner, Evan, leaned back in his chair, lifted the mic, and said the sentence that blew my entire life apart. "I mean, she's great and all," he said, nodding at me like I was a coworker giving a quarterly report, "but she's not even my real type." That's why it wasn't that hard to keep the other family quiet. The audience laughed. They actually thought he was joking. Even the host slapped the table like this was the best bit of improv he'd ever seen. And I swear, for a split second, I thought maybe Evan was joking too. Maybe he was doing that thing he does where he tests boundaries and then smirks like I'm too sensitive for not liking the punchline. But then he looked at me. Not at the crowd, not at the camera, me, and I'll never forget the expression on his face. It wasn't playful. It wasn't nervous. It was calm, intentional, like he'd been waiting to drop this bomb publicly. My stomach clenched. My ears were ringing so loudly that the laughter around us felt like it was echoing from underwater. I remember gripping the arm of the chair just so I wouldn't stand up and walk out mid-show. I think my body literally couldn't move. I felt paralyzed. Evan leaned toward me, using the crowd's noise as cover, and whispered, "Breathe. It's good for engagement. You're viral now." My chest tightened. Something in me cracked right then, not loudly, not emotionally, but like a small, clean break. A quiet snap. The host kept pushing the bit. "Oh, we got tea today," he said into the mic. The crowd whistled and whooped. Evan smirked and shrugged, pretending this was all some edgy joke. And I just sat there, my hands ice cold, replaying every memory of him leaving the house late, every strange phone call he took outside, every time he said I was overthinking. My mind was spiraling so fast I felt dizzy. But under all that shock, something else surfaced, this slow, steady heat rising in my chest, a warning signal. Because here was the thing Evan had forgotten. He wasn't the only one who liked to record things. A few months earlier, during one of our late-night arguments, the kind where he'd twist every word until I felt like the manipulative one, he slipped up. He'd said something he didn't mean to say, something that didn't match the timeline of his business trips. And I recorded it, not to use against him, not for revenge, but because I needed proof for myself that I wasn't imagining things. That recording became my lifeline. Back in the studio, Evan was still playing it up for the cameras, laughing, shrugging, pretending he was some charismatic troublemaker instead of a man detonating our life in front of strangers. I watched him bask in the attention, my humiliation fueling his moment. I felt something in me settle. I reached into my pocket, pulled out my phone, unlocked it. The host noticed and leaned in. "You wanna clap back," he teased. Evan grinned. "She doesn't have anything." But I did. I had everything. I held the phone up to my mic. The studio went quiet just from the way I moved. I pressed play. His voice, his real voice, sharp and panicked from months ago, filled the room. "Okay, fine, yes. She thinks I'm traveling for work, but you need to keep your mouth shut until I figure out how to leave her without losing my money." Gasps. The host's face went blank. Evan's jaw dropped. And into the mic, I said, "Let's talk about the part you forgot to mention." Before that day in the studio, before the lights and the laughter and the humiliation, there was just us. Me and Evan. And for a long time, I honestly thought we were solid. We met 4 years ago at a coffee shop in South Austin, one of those places where everyone pretends to read but mostly people watch. He spilled his iced latte on my laptop and panicked so hard that I ended up comforting him. That should have been my first red flag, me cleaning up his mess while he apologized in circles. But back then, it just felt like a cute meet-cute moment. He had this easy charm, the kind that made people relax around him. He listened well, or at least seemed to, and he talked about his dreams with this intensity that made me believe in them too. He said he wanted to build something big, a company, a legacy, a life that meant something. And I was in a place where hearing someone speak with that much fire felt intoxicating. Our early relationship was simple. Late-night tacos, weekend hikes at Barton Creek, cheap wine on my apartment balcony while we planned future trips we never got around to taking. He treated me like I mattered, and after a string of relationships that made me feel invisible, that was enough to hook me. But little signs started showing up. Things I shrugged off because I didn't want to seem paranoid. He was always on call, always a crisis at work, always some urgent deal that required him to leave at weird hours. And whenever I asked questions, he'd tilt his head and say, "Babe, you know how startups are." Like I was the one missing something obvious. I told myself he was ambitious, not shady, driven, not distant, building something for us, not away from me. When we moved in together, I honestly thought it would make things smoother. Instead, he got even harder to pin down. Gone earlier, home later, more tired, more stressed. Sometimes he'd come home smelling like hotel soap, the kind that isn't from any hotel he'd ever stayed at with me. It hit me in my gut, but I pushed it down. I didn't want to be the insecure girlfriend who made everything about cheating. And then there was the night that changed things. We'd gotten into an argument, nothing explosive, just one of those frustrating conversations where he twisted every question I asked. I was trying to understand why his credit card statement had a charge for a kids' play gym in Round Rock. He swore it was a mistake, that he'd used the wrong card helping a coworker out. He said it with so much confidence that I almost dropped it. But later, around 2 a.m., I heard him talking in the living room. Low voice, tense tone. I couldn't make out everything, but I heard enough. "She thinks I'm traveling for work. Need you to keep your mouth shut. Figure out how to leave without losing money." My heart dropped into a place I didn't know existed. I didn't confront him. I froze. I just stood there in the hallway, phone in hand, recording without even thinking about why. I felt this mix of nausea and clarity, like my body knew before my brain caught up. After that night, I started noticing everything. The lies, the distractions, the inconsistencies, the fact that he never let me meet certain coworkers. The way he kept his second phone hidden like it was radioactive. But even then, I didn't picture a second family. I didn't picture a whole separate life built out of excuses and deception. I just thought he was cheating. I had no idea how deep it really went. And standing in that studio, listening to him brag about the one thing that had destroyed me, it all clicked into place so painfully I felt it in my ribs. That recording wasn't an accident. It was the moment he slipped, the moment the truth cracked open, and I hadn't even used the worst part yet. After that night I recorded him, something in me changed. Not loud, not dramatic, just this quiet shift where my brain finally stopped giving him the benefit of the doubt. I didn't confront him. I didn't scream or cry or demand answers. I watched him, and he noticed. He started asking why I was acting weird, why I was so distant, why I wasn't being supportive during a stressful time. Meanwhile, he was the one disappearing more often. Business dinners turned into entire nights where he wouldn't come home until after sunrise. He'd stumble in smelling like a mix of cologne and someone else's perfume, but he walked around with so much confidence that I'd second-guess my own senses. That was his thing. He didn't just lie, he made me doubt myself for catching the lies. I started tracking small details: what time he left, what time he came back, which shirts he wore after work trips, whether his wedding ring was on or off. Each inconsistency felt like someone thumping on my chest from the inside. One night, about 2 months before the podcast, he got a text while we were watching TV. His phone was face up, and I caught a flash of the notification before he snatched it like a guilty teenager. It said, "The kids miss you. Please don't forget tomorrow." I felt the room spin. He claimed it was his sister. He said she was being dramatic. He told me to stop being controlling. He turned everything around on me so confidently that, for a second, I wondered if maybe I was overreacting. But then he forgot to delete the text thread. I found it 2 days later. A woman named Maya, 2 kids, Eli and Sophie, a photo of all 3 of them at a park in Round Rock. And right there in the corner of the screenshot was Evan's hand on Maya's waist. I remember sitting on the bathroom floor staring at the messages until my legs went numb. Every part of me felt like it was shutting down, one organ at a time. He had a life with her. A whole life, not a fling, not some stupid one-night thing, a family, and the worst part, he wasn't even trying to end it. He was trying to end me. Because buried deep in the messages, farther down than he probably realized, was a line that punched me in the stomach. Once I get clear of this situation, I'll have the money for the down payment. Just don't rush me. Clear of this situation. This situation. Meaning me, our home, our shared accounts. Everything I had built with him. He wasn't just cheating. He was preparing to cut me out like a tumor. After I found the messages, I didn't confront him. I didn't even cry. I felt detached, like I was watching my own life from a distance. He came home, kissed my forehead, made himself dinner, talked about his day, and I just observed him. I noted every lie he told as casually as breathing. The podcast invite came a few weeks later. The host was a mutual friend of his, and Evan was so excited. "This will be great for us," he said. "A chance to show people how solid we are." Solid. What a joke. I said yes. Because by then, I'd already made a decision. I wasn't going to confront him in private. I wasn't going to give him a chance to twist anything. If he wanted eyes on our relationship, if he wanted an audience, fine, I would give him one, and he would regret it. The night before the podcast, something happened that locked everything into place, something I didn't tell the host, the audience, or even include in the audio clip I played. Something that made what Evan did on air 1,000 times colder. I got home from work early. He wasn't expecting me. His car wasn't in the driveway, but his office light was on, which made no sense. He always turned it off. He was obsessive about the electric bill, which was hilarious considering how much money he was siphoning off behind my back. I pushed the door open and saw his laptop sitting open on the desk. And on the screen were documents he clearly thought he'd hidden well. A folder labeled, "Exit Plan, Q2, my stomach sank. I clicked it. Inside was a spreadsheet outlining every step he planned to take to separate himself from me financially. There were notes on our joint accounts, on what he had moved already, on what he still needed to move, on assets I didn't even realize he had rerouted under his name. There were projected timelines, projected costs, projected risks, and under a section labeled Unforeseen Variables, he had typed, "If she becomes suspicious, accelerate public narrative about incompatibility. Consider public humiliation strategy to gain sympathy. Frame breakup as mutual or her decision. Do not allow her to access lawyer before steps 4-6 are complete. Public humiliation strategy." He knew. He knew I was starting to see the cracks. And instead of working on the relationship, or ending it honestly, he built a plan to ruin me emotionally before I could ruin him financially. But that wasn't even the worst part. Buried in his email drafts, unsent but already written, was a message to Maya. "Podcast interview tomorrow. Going to start pushing the separation narrative publicly. Should smooth things out legally so she can't claim anything. After that, we can start the new place." The new place, a house in Round Rock. A house he planned to buy using money from accounts that my salary had helped fill. My hands were shaking so hard I had to sit down. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I didn't throw his laptop out the window like I wanted to. I sat there staring at the screen until my heart went cold. He wasn't trying to leave me, he was trying to erase me, and suddenly everything snapped into focus. The missing money, the secrecy, the gaslighting, the fake stress, the nights away, the credit card charges in Round Rock, the recorded confession, the kids, the woman. It was all part of a larger plan. He had been staging a breakup he could control, a breakup he could use. He wanted to make me look unstable, insecure, unreasonable, so when he finally left, he'd walk away looking like a victim of a toxic partner, and he'd keep everything. The accounts, the house, the investments, even the damn dog. My humiliation wasn't an accident. It was a scheduled step in his blueprint. So when he joked on air that I wasn't his type and bragged about the second family, he wasn't being reckless or dramatic. He was executing the plan. He thought humiliating me publicly would make me crumble. He didn't know I'd found everything. He didn't know I had the recordings, the emails, the spreadsheet, the timeline, the proof of financial manipulation. He didn't know the trap was already set. And when I played that one little clip in the studio, that wasn't revenge. That was just the first domino. The second that audio clip finished playing in the studio, the one where Evan basically admitted he was planning to ditch me without losing his money, the whole room froze. The host leaned back so fast his chair almost tipped. The audience's laughter died instantly, like someone sucked the oxygen out of the building. But I wasn't thinking about them. I wasn't even thinking about Evan's face, which had gone stiff and pale like he'd been caught shoplifting on live TV. All I could think was, this is nothing compared to what I'm about to do to you. Because by the time we got to that podcast, I'd already spent weeks preparing. I knew what he was planning. I knew how he wanted to isolate me, blindside me, strip me of everything, and walk away the good guy. He thought he was playing chess. He didn't realize I'd memorized the whole board. The first thing I did after finding his exit plan folder was get smart, quietly smart. I reached out to an attorney in Cedar Park who specialized in marital financial misconduct. I told her everything. She didn't flinch. She just said, if half of what you're describing is provable, he's in far more danger than you are. Provable. That word became my oxygen, so I documented everything. I screenshotted his emails. I copied the spreadsheet. I transferred every file to an encrypted drive. I printed hard copies and hid them in my office at work. I logged every suspicious withdrawal. I photographed every credit card statement. I backed up the recording from that night 3 different ways. Every time he looked at me with suspicion in the following weeks, I stayed calm. Every time he accused me of acting distant, I said I was just tired. Every time he tried to pick a fight, probably to bait me into acting unstable, I shut it down peacefully. He didn't realize passiveness can be a weapon when the other person thinks they're winning. Then came the matter of protecting myself financially. My lawyer told me to open a new checking account in my name only. She told me to route my direct deposit there, quietly, and to stop contributing to our joint account. She helped me freeze certain shared assets temporarily by flagging potential unauthorized activity. It worked. The account he planned to drain got locked. He didn't know why. He just kept muttering that the bank was being stupid, and started making phone calls in the garage like he was trying to keep me from hearing the panic. Meanwhile, I started building my own narrative, not publicly but privately with the people who mattered. Friends, family, coworkers. I gave them small, factual pieces, not gossip, evidence. Enough so that when he eventually tried to smear me, because he would, there'd be a wall of witnesses ready to tell the truth. Then came the wild card. I reached out to Maya, not to fight, not to attack her. Not to tell her off, just to inform her of one simple thing: I knew everything, and I had proof of every lie he had told us both. She didn't respond, not at first, but 2 days later she sent a message that changed everything. I didn't know, if you ever want to talk, I will tell you anything I can. I didn't reply, not yet, because I realized something: Evan wasn't the only one with leverage. The podcast appearance was my final preparation step. A stage he thought he controlled. An audience he thought would cheer for him, a moment he believed would set the narrative in motion. But I had a different plan. I was going to let him humiliate himself publicly, just enough. I was going to let him think he was winning. I was going to let him lay out his own rope. And then I was going to tighten it. The podcast clip wasn't the attack, it was the signal. The real revenge was already in motion, and he had no idea how deeply the knife was already what happened after the podcast wasn't dramatic at first. No yelling. No chasing me out of the studio. No begging or raging. Evan just sat there with this blank, frozen expression, like someone had unplugged the part of his brain that knew how to perform. The host cut to a break. The audience was dead silent. Producers scattered like cockroaches. And Evan finally turned to me. "What the hell are you doing?" he hissed, but his voice wasn't angry. It was scared. That was new. I stood up. I didn't say a word. I didn't even look at him. I just walked out of the studio, left the building, got into my car, and drove home. My hands were steady the whole time. I felt present in a way I hadn't felt in months. For the first time, I knew I was ahead of him. He came home late that night, way later than he should have after a blow-up like that, and that's when the second twist landed. The one I didn't see coming. Before I even stepped out of the bedroom to face him, I heard him talking to someone on speakerphone. Not Maya, someone else. A man with a flat, clipped tone, someone who sounded like he was giving orders. I walked quietly to the hallway. I didn't breathe, I listened. And Evan, my boyfriend, the man who'd built a double life, who'd humiliated me publicly, who drafted an exit plan like I was a liability, said one sentence that made my skin crawl. She played the audio, but she still doesn't know we used her accounts for the transfers. Used? My accounts. I felt the blood drain from my face. I hadn't known. I suspected shady money movement, yes, but I hadn't realized that he hadn't just siphoned money out of our joint accounts. He'd routed money through my personal accounts too. Money I'd never seen. Money that would legally trace back to me. The man on the phone responded calmly, too calmly. Then you fix it before she talks to anyone. Fix, not explain, not resolve, fix. And Evan's reply, I will. I just need to keep her from panicking. Once I get her to sign the update, all of this clears. The update. The mutual relationship agreement he'd been pushing me to sign for 2 months. The one he said was just a formality. The one my lawyer had told me, point blank, to never touch. My chest tightened. This wasn't just about money. This wasn't just about Maya. This wasn't just about humiliation. There was a third person. Someone he was working with. Someone who had a stake in whatever financial mess he'd dragged me into. And I realized, standing there barefoot in the dark hallway, that Evan wasn't just leaving me. He was using me. He was using my accounts, my credit, my clean record, my identity, all as a shield for a financial scheme I hadn't even known existed. My blood ran cold, because if I confronted him right then, he would know I'd overheard. He would adjust, he would hide, he would destroy evidence, he would pivot so fast I'd lose my advantage. So I backed away, slipped into the bedroom, closed the door quietly, and climbed into bed before he came upstairs. I pretended to be asleep. He crawled in next to me like nothing was wrong, like he hadn't used my life as a buffer for whatever illegal crap he was involved in. And as he put his arm around me like he always did, I made a decision. I wasn't just going to expose him. I was going to burn down every lie he'd built, every scheme he'd woven, every protection he thought he had. Because he didn't just betray me emotionally. He put my future, my finances, and my freedom on the line. The second twist wasn't that he had another family. It was that he had another agenda. And he wasn't planning to leave me. He was planning to sacrifice me. I didn't sleep that night. Not because I was scared. Fear had already burned out of me. It was something colder, sharper, a kind of clarity that comes when you finally stop hoping someone you love has a limit to their cruelty. By morning, I understood exactly what Evan had been doing. But I didn't understand why. Not really. Not until the truth hit me in a way that made my stomach hollow out. Because his motive wasn't love. It wasn't desperation. It wasn't confusion or some messy emotional affair he didn't know how to end. It was calculation. Pure. Ruthless, chill-your-bones calculation. And the reason behind all of it, the kids, the humiliation, the second family, the exit plan, the financial mess he tied to my accounts, came into focus 2 days later when Maya finally agreed to meet me. We met at a little cafe near UT Austin, both of us sitting stiff and awkward like strangers forced into some group project from hell. She looked exhausted, dark circles, puffy eyes, the look of someone fighting battles she hadn't signed up for either. She didn't waste time. He told me you were dangerous, she said softly. He told me you were unstable. He said you hit him. I blinked. What? She nodded, hands trembling around her coffee cup. He said you were possessive. That you were tracking him, that you were draining his accounts behind his back. He said you were jealous of me and the kids. My heartbeat stuttered. He what? She swallowed hard. He said he was terrified of you. That he wanted to leave, but you threatened to ruin his life. The room swayed. Because suddenly, the puzzle pieces reshaped themselves into something much more sinister. Something far beyond cheating or financial manipulation. This wasn't about escaping me. This was about building a narrative where he was the victim, where I was the problem, where my financial records were already corrupted, my behavior already erratic, my role in his life already weaponized. He wasn't covering his tracks. He was framing me. And that man on the phone, Maya told me exactly who he was. Evan's business partner. A partner being investigated by federal auditors for suspicious transfers through small accounts belonging to spouses, relatives, girlfriends. People with clean credit and clean records. People like me. People who made perfect shields. But what twisted my stomach into knots wasn't the scheme itself. It was the reason Evan chose me in the first place. Maya said it quietly, almost apologetically. He told me he picked you because you were trusting and simple and would never fight back. He said you were the safest kind of person to build a story around. Safe. The safest kind of person. Not because he loved me, not because he saw a future with me, but because I looked harmless. Because I didn't have a big family. Because I didn't have rich connections. Because I worked hard, paid my bills, and stayed out of trouble. Because he thought I'd break quietly. He built a relationship with me the way a con artist picks a bank with weak security. Even the podcast humiliation had a reason. He wanted a record, something public, something viral, that painted me as blindsided, emotional, reactive. Something he could use later to say, "See, this is how she is." That was the part that chilled me. He didn't love me. He didn't even hate me. He selected me. I wasn't a girlfriend. I was a liability he planned to detonate at the exact moment it benefited him. The betrayal wasn't emotional. It was strategic. Every kiss, every apology, every "I love you," every future plan, all of it was scaffolding for his escape route. Evan wasn't careless. He was cruel. He was building a story where I took the fall. And he really, truly believed I wouldn't stop him. The moment I understood the full truth, that Evan hadn't just betrayed me but selected me, used me, built an entire scheme around my life, I stopped feeling anything for him at all. No heartbreak, no longing, no grief, just focus. Cold, steady focus. Revenge wasn't about hurting him back. It was about ending what he built, ending it so completely that he wouldn't have a single lie left to hide behind. And I knew exactly where to start. The morning after I met with Maya, I walked straight into my attorney's office with a folder so thick she raised her eyebrows before I even sat down. Every email, every screenshot, every bank statement, every piece of his exit plan, every recording, yes, both of them, she read silently for about 20 minutes. Then she let out a low whistle and said, "He dug his own grave. You're just handing people the shovel." She called in a forensic accountant. She called in a family law specialist. And together, they drafted something I didn't even know existed. A preemptive affidavit of financial coercion and identity misuse. Signed, notarized, time-stamped. Which meant the moment Evan tried to accuse me of anything, legally or financially, I would already be documented as the victim. And he would already be under investigation. My attorney handed everything over to two agencies. The federal auditors already watching his business partner, and the Financial Crimes Unit in Travis County within 48 hours. Both agencies reached out to me for clarification, which meant they were already looking at him. I didn't need to blow anything up publicly. I didn't need a dramatic confrontation. The law was already sharpening its teeth. 3 days after the podcast, after I'd moved my essentials into a friend's house and transferred every important document into a safe place, Evan came home to an empty closet and a single envelope on the counter. Inside was a copy of the affidavit, a copy of the financial evidence, a printed screenshot of his exit plan, and a note with 9 words. "I'm not the safest person in your story anymore." He called me 27 times. I didn't answer once. The next day, his business partner's house was raided. 2 days later, Evan's accounts were frozen. By the end of the week, investigators showed up at his door. He tried to call me again. I blocked him. Maya ended everything with him. She gave her own statement to the investigators. She apologized to me through a long, shaking voicemail, not for what she'd done, but for not knowing. And I didn't blame her. We were both pawns in the same blueprint. The podcast studio released a statement distancing themselves from Evan. The clip of me playing the recording, yeah, that went even more viral. But this time, the world wasn't laughing at me. They were watching him unravel. His brand deals vanished. His business reputation collapsed. His partner turned on him. And with the investigation underway, he couldn't move a dollar without raising suspicion. Everything he had built on lies was caving in on him, inch by inch. A month later, my attorney forwarded me a message from his lawyer. Evan wanted to resolve things amicably. I told her my response was, "We resolved it the moment he underestimated me." I moved to a small apartment in East Austin, nothing fancy but peaceful. I sleep better there, I breathe easier. I trust myself again. And every time I think about the plan he had for me, the humiliation, the erasure, the criminal setup, I remind myself of one simple truth. He thought I wouldn't fight back. He was wrong. Very, very wrong, and honestly. Going viral wasn't the punishment. Surviving him was.